All right, hi guys, welcome back. We're going to talk about Chapter 8, Ways of Knowing. This is going to go into learning preferences and some of our strengths and weaknesses. So you're going to be able to describe the theory of multiple intelligences, relationship between emotional intelligence and self-regulation, and then identify the different types of thinking that we call successful intelligence. And then this final one is super important, multimodal learning. This is where we're going to bring it all together in how we learn. So Howard Gardner's, this is in your book. You can watch the video. You can also do the assessment. But he says there's 8 different forms of intelligence, and they function independently of the others. And we each have a mix of all 8. And I really want to stress that. Any sort of assessment that you do, where it, you know, personality assessments, learning assessments, all of them are usually a mix. And what we have is preferences. So you're going to have ones that you lean into more and want to use more, but you have a mix of all. So we're going to talk about how our growth mindset, how we bring that in with it. So here's the 8 specific intelligences. Excuse me. Definitely, if you have the time, do this assessment from the book. Normally, we would do this in class, so you can kind of see where you land, and you can see where all of those. Some of these you can probably tell right off the bat, like this one, kinesthetic. I can never say that word. The body, the ability to move. That's a lot of students who have a hard time sitting down in class and listening to a lecture for an hour, 20 minutes, whatever, and really need that hands-on learning. You probably lean really into this one, right? Excuse me. So you really want to start doing things like, I know for me, this isn't big for me, but one thing I have to do to help me focus is on my notes. As I'm taking notes, I draw on the side as I listen because it helps me keeps me from personally daydreaming. So if you have to be moving, maybe when you're writing your notes, doodling or doing something that helps keep you moving even just a little bit may help with your attention and focus as you listen to a lecture. Um, all of these, naturalistic is one I know for me is real low. My highest one, musical, is real low for me, but I have students that rate real high for this. And so they do things like they record themselves singing or rapping their notes because they want that musical beat to it that helps them remember things and helps them increase their memory. Other ones that rate real high on this use music. They listen to it while they study. They find that that helps them kind of connect some things, having something in the background like that. Logical mathematical doesn't always mean that you need math. I usually rate real high on this because of the logic. I like things to flow very logically for me. Very abstract ideas really throw me. I want it to be concrete and understandable. You will see linguistics, the ability to speak and write well. You can also, this is going to affect how you study because you might want to hear things. Maybe you need to start recording things. This is why I do the recorded lectures because some of us need a little bit more than the reading. So if you need to hear things, you want to do the lectures, YouTube videos, things like that. So it's important to understand these because really they're, like I said, they're preferences. You want to know the ones you lean into, the ones that you are weak, because the flip side of that is all of your professors also lean into their preferences, right? We all have these specific intelligences. So if you have a professor that really um, just wants to do the logic in math and doesn't move out of their intelligence, you have to adapt to them because as a professor, I have 25 of you, but you guys have one of me. So I can't teach 8 different intelligences in one class. My head would explode. So you kind of have to adapt to your different professors. So knowing some of their intelligences and being able to sort of pick up on them can help you adapt with yours. Emotional intelligence is huge. I think we don't always talk about it enough. It's really important that you recognize your own emotion to sort of pick up on what's going on with people around you, and be able to understand those feelings and then use it as that guide in thinking behavior. So I tell students, if you come into a class every day, you are just angry, like the thought of the class makes you angry, makes you want to throw something. You need to understand, why are you angry? Is it because it's something to do with the professor? Maybe they remind you of somebody that you absolutely hate, but it's not actually that person, but it's bringing in that emotion, because it's going to affect you when you're trying to study, because that emotion comes up, right? It's going to affect you in class because you don't want to be there if it's making you mad. So you need to understand that emotion so that you can take the next step and try to resolve it. Why are you angry? Maybe you genuinely are angry at your own professor. And what are you going to do to resolve it? Can you talk to them during office hours? Can you get help that you need? You feel like they're not helping you. Can you use YouTube or the Learning Lab, something to supplement outside of class? You've really got to address that emotion so that you know how to manage it, so it doesn't affect your goals, right? All of this is about our values and goals. You want to make sure it's not affecting that and stopping you from reaching your own goals. People with high levels of emotional intelligence are able to recognize and reflect on their own emotions, which is what we want, and the people around them. So you see, both of these are the intelligences that are listed from Gardner's intelligences. It's important to understand what's going on around us too. If you're coming to class and everything's fine, but everybody around you is always angry, you might want to take a minute and figure out why they're angry every time they're around you. Is it something that you're saying? Is it something that you're doing? And it's just important to understand. Maybe you figure out what it is and you're fine with it. Or maybe you figured it out and you realize that you were being insensitive, or you were dominating the conversation so nobody else could get a chance to respond. Anything like that. So then we talk about regulating it. Again, and this is all from your book. We really want to regulate and productively use your emotions, right? I have had students that hated a class that they were in, and it motivated them. It motivated them to kick ass in that class because somebody told them they couldn't, right? And you can use that emotion, but they understood why and where it was coming from. So, and that's just a small example. Please don't get angry in all your classes. But you can use that to help regulate. And then the importance of delaying gratification. And I think this is my personal opinion. I think that gets harder for us when we live in a world where everything comes to us immediately now, right? You can order groceries and have them in your porch in 2 hours. Amazon really threw us with Prime, which I am a huge, huge, huge fan of. But everything comes with us almost within 24 hours. So delayed gratification is becoming a little bit harder for a lot of us, especially for a lot of you guys that maybe just kind of grew up with this world already the way it is. But it's important to prioritize and to use that. Okay, I want to play this video game, but I'm going to write my paper first, or I'm going to do this amount of my reading first and set that aside, and kind of use it as a reward system and kind of control what's going on with you. So it helps you be less impulsive because you can kind of understand, again, going back to the SMART goals and putting on that timetable kind of plays into this, right? Because you're building out the time, you're not running out. So if you're going to buy a car and you want to save, a certain amount of money so that your monthly payments are real low, then you set a timetable and you delay that buying the car instead of running out and buying the first car that you see because it's pretty and shiny, and then having an insane monthly payment that's affecting your ability to pay rent or to go out and socialize or, eat. You're less likely to procrastinate because you've sort of got it built in and you have something coming. Of course, higher cognitive and social intelligence, better SAT scores, socially adept, and coping with frustration and stress. And really, that just goes back to the emotional regulation because you're if you remember back from Eisenhower and the Covey model, you're spending a lot of time in quadrant 2, right? Where you're regulating, you're understanding what's going on with you. You're taking that time for reflection. It's really difficult to be. I myself can be a very passionate person, and sometimes I respond to something that I'm very passionate about before I've thought it through. On the flip side, my sister is one who will, if she's angry, she'll take it out on you right there, and then she's over it. She's fine. And I like to take my time to make sure that I understand why I'm angry before having an emotional response. And it frustrates her because I'll come back to her a couple of days later. And I was like, hey, I'm ready to talk about what happened the other day. And she's like, well, I'm over it. I'm done. And I'm like, no, I had some time to sort some stuff out. And but we figured out how to work with that because we regulate our emotions very different ways. So that's one of the things you want to think about, is how you respond to things. Do you just shut down? That's an emotional response. So you have homework, but you shut down and you don't do it. Then we need to find out, why are we shutting down? What is causing that emotional response from you? Because it's a barrier. It's making it harder for you to get things done. It's increasing that procrastination. And then I suspect it's making you anxious and increasing your stress. So it's having all these negative effects on your emotions and probably your body. But the key is, procrastination strategies that we've talked about can work in there, but we need to find out what's making you shut down. Even with procrastination, we need to find out what's making you procrastinate, because there's procrastination like, I hate sweeping the floors and vacuuming. I don't have a reason why. I just hate it. So I do procrastinate on that, but that is mild. Like it's not preventing me from working, doing my schoolwork, feeding my kid, the things that I need to take care of. So when it gets to the point where you're not able to take care of the things you need, we need to dig a little bit deeper and find out what that emotional response is. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to successful intelligences. They're broken down into 3: analytical thinking, creative thinking, and practical thinking. So analytical thinking is that it's very logical. And again, this is another one that you have all 3 of these. But we lean into the ones that are kind of our strength. So we all know a very analytical type, right? Sometimes we feel like they're criticizing us when oftentimes their analytical brain is just saying, oh, here is a flaw, let me point it out. And there's no emotional context behind it. It's just they lean into analytical thinking a lot more than maybe other people. And you can say this about all 3 of these intelligences. Creative thinking, we talked about again with our critical thinking. This is not restricted to being like artsy or being the ones creative arts that we tend to think of. This is that problem solving. This is that looking at things from different perspectives, looking at it in new ways. I think from an old textbook that for this class I used to love, they had examples like, I don't know if you guys do any gardening, but there's a little bug called an aphid that likes to eat up, like especially rose plants and certain garden like squash plants. And but ladybugs like to eat aphids. So someone had the idea, and I don't know who it was, to start cultivating ladybugs. And if you go to Amazon, you can buy a crap ton of ladybugs that you let out in your yard, and they eat these aphids if you have plants that they're destroying for you. That's just a different way to look at, like, who would have thought that you could buy ladybugs on Amazon? But somebody had the thought that it was like, oh, if I breed these and sell them, people can use them as a natural pest control specifically for these aphid bugs. Another one they talked about is the guy that invented Velcro actually got the idea from his dog, from those little burr stickers that, like, when you walk in tall grass, that get stuck on like your shoes and your pants. That was his inspiration for Velcro. So things that we don't even think about, like that we just kind of take advantage day to day, came from those creative thinking. And you watch the video about how GPS was formed, and it was a whole process. They weren't even trying. That was never the goal, and it was just a byproduct of something that they were playing with. All those are ways that we do creative thinking in these intelligences. And then last is practical thinking, is also just kind of called common sense thinking. So that's the thinking that comes from our experiences, right? So there's certain things that we know don't work for us. And so we use that practical thinking to kind of determine what's going to be, usually with problem solving, what's going to be the best solution. So if you remember from our problem solving method, we started with analyzing the problem. So that would be this ability to think abstractly, right? So that would be this analytical piece. We analyzed the problem. We formulated new ideas. So we did our brainstorming. This is where I talked about, like, students, we used the example of a student that was struggling in their course. We identified why they were struggling. We came up with solutions. And then we used our practical thinking to determine what was the best solution. So remember, I made the joke about students always say bribe the professor, and then practically we know most college students can't afford to bribe a professor. These are the ways that we decide what works for us. So this is if you're struggling in the course, this is where you decide if dropping the course is the best decision for you so that you can be successful and start fresh next semester, or if you just need to change your study habits, employ your resources like the Learning Lab. That's all going to depend on you. So if we have two students with the same problem, we could potentially have different solutions because of their practically what is going on in their lives. Are they balancing work and a family? Are they a traditional student and all they're doing is school? There's going to be so many different variables that help you decide what's this practical choice for you. All right, so we have a multimodal learning. We have a variety of ways that we learn, and we can be very adaptable. Some people in general, this isn't even just restricted to students, lean really, really hard into their preferences, and it is harder for them to adapt. But it's not impossible. So remember our growth mindset. Nothing with learning is impossible. But it does mean if you're very logical and you're very mathematical, you may struggle in a humanities course. I had a student that was just completely stressed out because he loved math. His goal was to be a math teacher. But his humanities course was to watch a certain movie and then analyze it. And it just threw him because it wasn't like math where there's very clear answers and there's a very clear process. Doesn't mean he can't do it and doesn't mean he can't do well in humanities, but it does mean that that assignment stressed him out and it was going to take a little bit more work on his part. And then you're going to have the other side of students that would love just to watch a movie and analyze and pick it apart and talk about it, but don't want to do a math problem. These are all things that we can learn. It does mean it takes a little bit longer to adapt and to change our preferences and go into some of those weaknesses. What we want to be careful of is learning styles, which is something that has been talked about, something that has been drilled into all of us, both as educators and students. I've always said, whatever assessment you take, whatever it is, whether it's personality learning, you're going to do a career assessment in this course, you're never in a box. There is never one answer in there. It's like, okay, you like this thing and that's it. That's not how humans work. So be really, really careful if you're doing any sort of assessment with a learning style or a personality style, to make sure that you don't unintentionally create those barriers. Oh, I only can learn visually. I can't learn any other way, and then you have the risk of shutting down, losing interest, and that is a fixed mindset, right? The only way you can learn is visually. Then you've now stopped yourself. So be really careful with the way that we approach learning and the way that we look at things. I believe assessments help us kind of see our preferences, again, what we kind of like, but that doesn't stop us from what we're going to do. And then I find as you further your learning and as you grow and evolve as a student, an assessment you took maybe at the beginning, if you took it like a year later, you might even get different results because we evolve and we change. I certainly can tell you I was way more extroverted when I was younger. And so any assessment I took would read extroverted, extroverted. And now, as I'm older and doing different things, I find myself way more introverted because that has evolved. I've changed. My environments have changed. Different things in my life have changed. So we're constantly evolving. So be really, really careful when we talk about learning styles and what that means for you. And don't let yourself get that fixed mindset that you can only learn one way and that's it. You can learn different ways. Sometimes it just takes a little bit more work, which of course sucks. Nobody wants a little bit more work, but you can do it. You will have to do it. And part of the experience of college is that we want you to do that. We want you to learn different ways to learn because it will just help you once you get out and you're in your career and you're working. You'll be able to approach problems from different ways because I don't care what your career is. Very rarely is there one way to approach a problem, and this will help you be able to approach it naturally without even thinking about it different ways because you built these skills while you were learning. So again, more growth mindset, the benefits of growth mindset, you can do it. Understanding your personal engagement and motivation. So again, like I said, it sucks to work harder, but sometimes we have to. So using that student who wanted to be a math teacher, he did the humanities assignment. His motivation was not the movie, it was not the paper. His motivation was his ultimate goal of wanting to graduate so that he could go and teach math. He loved the idea of teaching math. He was very passionate about it. That was his motivation. Now that gets tricky for some of us, and I was a student. If you're not sure what you're going to be yet when you grow up, that's okay too. I was 30 before I figured it out. So I did 2 years at ACC, got my core, and then kind of just went into working because I didn't know what to do next. So watch your motivation. Maybe your motivation can be figuring out what you want to be. And we're going to do the focus to you have resources, so you have somebody you can work one-on-one. If you have a lot of interest, it's hard to sometimes narrow it down because what we want as hobbies and what we want as career can be very different. So watch that motivation. If you feel that motivation slipping, again, go back to that emotional intelligence, go back to that growth mindset, and see if you can determine where is that motivation slipping out, and then what can you do? What can you reach out to? Usually, it's got to be a resource that we have for you that can kind of help bring it back for you. Information in our brain is stored in terms of meaning. In the next video for chapter 9, we're going to talk about memory and how we store information. Of course, to be more engaged in your learning is going to make it easier to remember. It's going to make it easier to store that information. And we're going to talk about encoding and retrieval process, but basically that just means encoding is how we store that information. So if your brain is, think of a filing cabinet, your brain, every new piece of information basically makes a file for it and then stores it, and then you retrieve it the same way. So, excuse me. There's different ways that you can encode. Some of us use musical things, and that's how you retrieve it. If you have a memory, you're going to associate to that memory, and that's how you're going to encode it, and that's how you're going to retrieve it. So think of like a certain smell. You've associated that smell with maybe a season. Like a lot of people, when the weather gets colder and they smell like, I'm going to do it, I'm going to say it, pumpkin spice latte is my favorite. That smell you've associated with fall. That's how you've now stored it, and that's how you're going to always retrieve it. So when we talk about learning and study habits, there's all kinds of memory strategies we'll talk about because that's how you're going to encode that information that you learned in your class, and that's how you're going to retrieve it, right? And we do have students who mix that up, and we're going to talk about that as well with that encoding and retrieving process. All right. So the biggest takeaway I want you to get from this is you have preferences, you have learning preferences, you need to understand them, you need to understand your emotions behind the things that you do and the way that you respond to things, and then use those successful intelligences to create those solutions to build your motivation, to hold on to your motivation. Motivation is hard. It's very, very fluid. So sometimes you're really highly motivated and sometimes you don't want to do anything. And that's okay. That's perfectly normal. And then it's coming back to that motivation to make sure that you can move forward with your goals and move forward with your tasks that you need to do. And then just remember that you can use those intelligences. You can learn different ways. You can learn, and you can use that to supplement because you're going to have different professors with different styles. But you can absolutely adjust to that. You can adjust to the different courses. Just make sure that you build in your time management extra time for the courses that play into your weaknesses and to the intelligences that are like kind of your least preferred. All right, and that's all I got for you today, guys. Thanks so much.